Welcome to Blender add-on development for beginners. In this video, we are going to look at how to send email messages. We start where we left off and define a function to verify the mail configuration. This will be used by an operator that we define in a moment. We will use the connection status variable to communicate how the verification went, and the first thing we do is to check in a built-in variable to see if we are allowed to connect to the internet. A user can indicate in Preferences System Network whether or not internet connections are allowed. Blender cannot actually enforce that, but we should respect that and report this back to the user. The online access variable reflects the user preferences, but if Blender is run from the command line, it may have been given the online mode option to override the user preferences, and that is reflected in the online access override variable. If we are allowed to connect, we get a reference to the user preferences because we need access to all those properties. We create an smtp SSL instance from the class we imported at the top and pass it in the server name and port. Then we log in using the stored credentials and perform a no-op. If none of this raises an exception, we indicate success in the connection status and return true. If there was an exception, for whatever reason, we catch it and show the reason as part of the connection status and return false. As you can see, we assume all mail server connections use SSL exclusively, and most providers indeed require this. But if you have an internal mail server that does not, you might use the smtp class instead. Or have your code negotiate whether to use SSL or not, depending on what the server tells your client what is it capable of. The documentation provided with Python's smtp-lib module gives some examples on how to do that if you need it. Next thing is to define an operator that uses this function. It's very straightforward. It doesn't need a poll method, for example, because it doesn't depend on anything. So the execute method simply calls our verification function. It uses the return value to determine what to show in Blender status bar. For this, it uses the report method that's part of every operator and shows an appropriate message. This is in addition to the connection status variable, but this gives a nice brief notification in the status bar. Now the verify function could have been coded directly as part of the execute method, but this way we could move the function to a separate file. A setup more suitable to testing. We don't show that here, but creating add-ons that consist of multiple files is something we might cover in a future module. We still need to show the operator in the user preferences, so we add it to the final column. And we also add it to the tuple of classes that will be registered. Next, we create something similar, but now to actually send a message and not just test the connection. That function looks similar, but accepts a content argument that is used to create an email message instance. We set the content and also configure the subject, from, and to headers. We're not going into the technicalities of email messages here, but these headers define what the recipient will see and are part of the message and have nothing to do with the connection to the mail server itself. This connection is set up in the same way we did for verification, but instead of doing a no-op, we send the message and then close the connection with quit. The connection status is updated just as before. We also define an operator to test sending a message. We won't need this in the final version of the add-on, because then we will send the message when the render job ends, but here we wanted to test things. We add the operator to the preferences, and also to the tuple of classes. We save our file and then uninstall the previous version of the add-on. We install the new one and then test it. I use some of my own email addresses here and you can immediately see the problem. I have to blur some of those fields, not just to hide those addresses, but also to hide the password. Blender does not have a password type property that shows its content as asterisk or dots or something, so we use a regular string property here. That is absolutely the wrong way to do it, and we will fix that later in a later video in this module. but it does allow us to test our connection. So when we also fill in a server and click verify, the connection status shows OK. And if we then click send mail and wait for a few seconds, we hear a ping and see the mail program pop up a reception notification. Okay, so far so good. We can create proper user preferences and we can send email, but we haven't connected this to the end of a render job yet. And of course, we need to address that password issue too. Both will be covered in the next video. So thank you for watching and see you there.